Oh hey, it's Christmas, but it's also DOScember. It's a time where we come together to celebrate all things DOS, and I've got a project for you. I thought about the kinds of gifts you could receive, and I came up with something techie that many of us got, combined with MS-DOS. You want to know more? Well, keep watching. Cheers. This is Coke. This is not exciting at all.
Yes, when I think of a lot of the gifts us kids received back in the day, there was one type of gift that always stuck out, and that was games consoles. I always remember the buzz back at school when we told each other what we got. Inevitably it was a new Sega console, something from Sony, or even a new Nintendo product perhaps. But for me, I never really had consoles growing up. I had PCs. And one thing about consoles that set them apart from these was how quick and easy it was to get them going. You put the cartridge in, you turn it on and go. You're done. Enjoy your game. By comparison, PCs are a little more long-winded and manual in their approach, but that's all cool with me. But what would it look like if, years ago, somebody had created a games console that ran DOS, but felt much like using any other console? Well, I guess we're going to find out. Let's build an MS-DOS games console. So first we need to define what we want this console to be. We want it to be relatively small. If you've ever seen any of the consoles of, say, the early to mid 90s, you'll know that they aren't huge, so something that's near to that size as possible would be ideal. I also want to use real hardware for this. It would be the easiest thing just to get a Raspberry Pi and load it up with Pi Station or DOSbian, but I want to do this with real hardware from about the early to mid 90s. That means an x86 CPU of some kind. This console will have real GPU acceleration that, while most games may not really make use of, some can and will. We will be using MS-DOS, most likely version 6.2.2, to give that authentic, compatible experience. It'll also be designed to be able to play games up to the ones released in 1996. And finally, all games will be loaded off floppy disks. More on that later. Now, I don't know how hard or easy this will be to achieve, but other companies managed it, like Commodore and Apple with their CD-TV and Pippin respectively. The CD-TV was basically an Amiga and the Pippin was a Power Macintosh. Both had modified hardware and software that made them work for the purpose of being consoles, but one key difference was that both these companies had control over all of this. In this case, I don't, so I'll have to mesh MS-DOS together with the PC hardware as best I can. I mean, how hard can it be?
Don't say that!
But let's get on with it. First we have to figure out a few things. We'll start with the software. So there are some software concepts that I want to test out. For this, I'll enlist the help of the 98 machine. We can use it as a test bed for this stuff before we try it on the build. First, we just need to remove access to the current drive, and I'll be adding this compact flash card. I then oriented it on the case just like this, just so it wouldn't short out on the metal parts of it. Don't worry, I went back and cleaned this up later. It's now suspended in the air hanging from the IDE cable. Next, I'll just need to prepare a fresh installation of DOS 6.2.2. I ended up using disk images on my Floppy emulator and it went super quick. I almost didn't believe it had actually worked, but once that was done, I arrived out of the DOS prompt, so we can now start testing. The first problem to tackle comes back to how I wish to load software. I want it to be as simple as consoles, where you put the game in, press power and you're there. But how on earth would you do that for a game like Quake? There's no way that would fit on a floppy. To make this work, essentially I'll be lying to you. Yep, this whole thing is going to be smoke and mirrors, but I'll show you what I did. At first I thought of something like bootloaders, but honestly, there were easier ways to do this and this is what I came up with. This is the autoexec file. After loading all of the needed items for the system, it then loads this line here. This then reaches out to a file on the floppy drive. Once it gets there, the file it runs has some simple instructions in it that points back to the hard drive and in particular a specific game. If you run the PC without a floppy, it won't do anything, but if you pop in the disk and Ctrl-Alt-Delete, when it gets to the end, there we go, it's loaded the game on the disk. And all you have to do is modify that file for the game in question. You could also specify other command line options too if you so needed. Alongside this, I set up a mouse driver and enabled the ability to use an optical drive, which may come in handy for potential add-ons in the future. One last thing I tried to get working was mapping joystick controls to keyboard keys, the idea being that most of the time you could control this with just a gamepad. I used JoyEmu, something I found on Zophar's domain, though I did have a few problems with it. I could configure it, but something didn't feel right about the results in game. Here the character of Cosmo is moving in a jerky fashion, and when I go back to the command line, characters end up being typed. These are the ones that I mapped. I can barely get into the config utility. Once there, the display spazzed out, interestingly, mostly when I moved the mouse. I wonder if this is conflicting with the Qt mouse driver. Well, I'll leave it for now and move on. One last thing, I added drivers to support the Sound Blaster Live inside the 98 machine, though they will not be present in the console. Just in case anyone is interested, here's the full autoexec.bat. Well, with these things now defined, we should introduce the hardware. So this is what I'm going to be using. This is some kind of industrial SBC, and from the data I could find about it, it's by a company called Atro. They make a whole bunch of these, it seems. This one in many ways is ideal. It's small, takes a Pentium type CPU, so you know it will have enough grunt in that department, and actually has a PCI slot for expansion, something that will help us a little bit later. It takes either EDO or SD RAM and has support for PC104 cards. Definitely more on that later. Here's a shot of the back. So we should probably start building this up for a test. For storage I'll be using an SD to IDE adapter, and I have this small cable which is actually meant for an Amiga, but it will do just fine here. The way I found to put it in is on the back. This square pin marker shows pin 1 and that matches with the red stripe. As far as I know the card part faces up, but I will check. Next up I'll just slot in some RAM. I actually forgotten about this, so raided my supply and found this 128MB SD RAM stick. It's bigger than I wanted, as I had envisioned around 32MB, but it may be the only one for now that is physically small enough to avoid touching anything. I have more in order. Now for the CPU, arguably the most important part. I've gone with this Pentium 133. I feel it will be enough, without being too far over the top. Ideally this project would be probably better suited for a 486, but there's no board I could find like this with a card slot. The heatsink proved to be a little difficult. I had bought these heatsinks hoping to be able to attach them, but found really it was impossible. A quick Google search showed that this type of heatsink attached by clinging onto the lift socket frame. Well, as you can see, this isn't that. I actually went with one of these, which should be enough at that speed, but we will see. Also, there's jumpers on this board that need to be set for the CPU and bus speed you're using. I referred back to the manual for this. Now for video output. I have this S3 type graphics card. I didn't go for a Voodoo because, well, I don't have one, and I wondered about being just a little ostentatious. But apparently this does do 3D acceleration, and with 4MB of RAM should be sufficient. For the moment I'm just going to stick it straight in, but I will need to remove the bracket. Okay, so to power this, apparently all this needs is power to this. So I got this Pico PSU and paired it with a jumper. It doesn't appear that the board has soft power on, so something like this is needed to short some pins. All you need to power that at this end, however, is a 12V power supply, and luckily I have one. Okay, here goes. Well, there seems to be a problem. There's the tiniest blip from the speaker, but no life at all. I pulled the RAM out and had another go, but still, I had the same. Unsure if this is even the video card having issues, but I kind of wonder if it might be due to a dead Dallas clock chip, but I do actually have one. Let's try that out. Unfortunately, that didn't fix it, and it seemed like nothing else I did could make it boot. I don't even know where to start. Is it the CPU, the graphics card, the RAM, or something else? I have no idea. I attempted to hook up a VGA cable to the onboard video header, but that too doesn't seem to do anything. I spoke to the seller to see how he had connected his up, and we exchanged troubleshooting. In the meantime, I ordered a new CPU and postcard, just in case that was it. Seller also suggested checking the power connector, as they seem to be unreliable on these boards. For now, I had to move on to other steps in this project, but with the way I'm shooting this, I'll be keeping all this footage together. So a bit later on, my postcard and CPU arrived, and while I think I know what's wrong, I want to try out the card first as I want to learn how this works. So let's start with that. Here it is out the packet. Not much to see here, let's just plop it in and have a look. Also, my RAM came, so let's put that in too. Now let's test it and see what we get. Well, we get all dashes. That CPU is executing no code at all, but it's encouraging to not only see the 5 and 12 volts on there, but also a clock signal in the top right. Maybe we're okay, but we must remove the old CPU, and that was easier said than done. Trying to leave out with a spudger wasn't doing it, so I had to resort to a screwdriver. If doing this, just be careful. But finally, it was freed. with this postcard back in, let's install a new CPU. I'm doing this on camera so you can see that there's no funny business here, and as I want to be clear that it won't be ESD that kills this. The CPU did come embedded onto some polystyrene, which did concern me, but I guess we'll see. Pins look good, and it pushed down okay. I did have to lift the board to make sure it was down on all sides, but over to LiveMe to test it. Okay, so I'm going to take it live because I want to sort of get this all, sorted. I want to speak to you like in a more easy way. Right, so the new CPU is in, obviously, and it's I've just laid the heatsink on top, but yes, it is the 166 Pentium MMX. And starting from the top, the bus speed is set to 66, as it should be. These three jumpers are in place, which means it's selecting the correct chip. And to get the 2.8 volts that this chip runs at, only this jumper down here is needed. Now, hopefully this does something. If it doesn't, I'm going to be kind of worried. I've got the fan plugged in for, get some spinach going. The postcard is in there. And we've got the new RAM in. So, I'm kind of nervous. Got my power. 3, 2, 1. Yes! The board isn't dead. Right, I'm just going to upend this. Right, I don't know what that is because it's all upside down and what have you. Whoops. But no, doesn't do anything. Right. Oh man, that's amazing. Right, let's have a look at the card. Well, that's good. CPU is clearly doing something, which means the last one is dead. But we still have a non-boot problem, and those beeps remind me of something. I decided to reseat the RAM, but that didn't help. So I swapped back to my previous RAM stick and... well, what do you know? That RAM was bad too. We now have post screen, the board is fine, and we can continue happy in the knowledge that this project might not be over. We can try fitting all the other items and test them, including the SD card and the floppy disk drive. The latter is a slim floppy, and in this case, as such, has a ribbon interface that needs an adapter that I have right here. It's tricky to get in, but I managed it. All I need after this is a power adapter cable, in this case a SATA to floppy, that just fits onto one of the spare connections at the end of the Pico PSU loom, and then the floppy cable itself. Just this single link affair. But testing it, we find ourselves in a familiar situation. No boot. What the heck? What is it now? Something wrong with what I plugged in? The floppy made noise though, so at least that may work. Pulled out the storage, but nope, still nothing. Removed the fan, plugged it back in, tested, and the system came back. Could it be storage? Multiple cycles seemed to work again though. Putting the storage back yielded the same problem, no boot. This time with just a cable, and then removed again, still dead. I was getting scared at this point. More experiments showed that the board came back after leaving it for a bit, and with the cable alone this didn't cause a problem. So, back to LiveMe for the diagnosis. Okay, so I think I've understood. I'm taking this live because it's easy to explain rather than try and patterning it into a voiceover. I think I know what the issue was. The cable could actually have been backwards, and this is fine by the way. All you have to do is leave it for a few minutes and then it'll come back, so it's not permanently damaged. This thing, I can't really say either way what's going on with it. It may be completely broken, but I may have had it backwards. The first time I put it in, it was facing that way, card up. Of course I put it on the other end of the cable, so now it faces that way. But either way, you've got a notch right there, and it doesn't matter which way you put the cable, whether you put it down there or you put it in here and have it facing this, like coming out to this side. The notch goes that way. Right, you with me on that one? So, I'm just gonna pull this out. Oh, that's hard. You bend pins when you do that. But if you look at the hard drive here, you've got a missing pin at the bottom. You've also got a missing pin at the bottom there. So that is facing up, you'd think. Right? Okay, so then we take our cable. Now that notch is going to prevent it going the wrong way, so if you put that in there, it doesn't go. But if you put the notch to the bottom, eventually we got there, it allows you to do it. So using that same logic, if that's at the bottom, then that's the way it should go. What I was matching it up with was where it says pin 1, I assumed that was power, and it would go across to the line, which I assumed was pin 1 over there. I'm probably completely wrong about this, and if you look at the back, the trace, I don't know if this is even going to focus, I'm going to try and use my screwdriver to point here. That red line is obviously power, because look where it goes. These two lines here, these two traces go to a regulator. I've had it backwards, and it was probably feeding back into this thing. Goodness knows what that's doing to it, but it seems to be okay now because, as I say, you leave it for a bit and everything's fine. But this could be popped, I may have to buy another one. Or I might just use the long cable that came in the box and get a different one to go out the front. There are actually two headers, or standoffs on the board here, which looks like they would have had connectivity for that, though I can't use it because the RAM's in the way. Yeah, either way, we're going to solve this. Don't you worry about it. Even if I have to fake it and put a compact flash on the inside and then do the SD mod later, that's fine. But we're going to test this out the right way, as in, you know, pin 1 being away from the red stripe, and we'll see where we get to. 3, 2, 1. No, it's wrong. Now it will bleep, but you'll not see anything. Yeah, I think I'm going to can this. Yeah, it's back again, and I'm just going to leave it. I think I just want to get it inside the case. Okay, so at the time while I was waiting on parts, I decided to get along with getting the casing together. A little while ago I bought this small form factor ITX case. I had been looking for another one of these that was going to be appropriate for my build, and felt that the shape of the front felt very 90s, or could at least help it look that way. The case came with an accessories box that has many things, including a power adapter. This one's a hefty 12V 5A thing, plenty of power. Here's an adapter for slim optical drives to convert them to full-sized IDE, along with the screws. You also get a 40 to 44 pin IDE cable with power breakout, and lastly, a plastic stand to make the case vertical. But we must open this up and clean out the inside, so disassembly montage. Now that's done, I'm just going to fit the board inside the case quickly. I'll be attaching it using one of the original standoffs, as where that is convenient. Yes, I have done a few test fits before now, and I know there are two standoffs near the opposite end of the board that will cause us some problems. For example, one is resting on a power regulator for the CPU, raising the board. No good. So these need to be cut down a bit. I measured it and it seemed like 3mm would do for both of them. I marked them off with a Sharpie and then got out the tool we're going to use, a rotary multi-tool or a generic Dremel, whatever suits you. This next bit was very daunting. I had visions of it all going wrong. During the process I did break a few cutting wheels, but in the end I got both posts chopped off with a little help from some big cutters and some low grit sandpaper. Also, sorry for the really bad angles during that, but looking pretty good. Next, I had to drill holes for the extra standoffs that we needed to attach the board firmly. Just a drill in a small bit, simple really. After that it was just a simple matter of screwing in the standoffs. I went with these ones that are inverted to what you would normally expect, as the standoffs I had chosen would not be long enough to have two screws from each direction, so at least doing it this way means I can use nuts on the board side and get the things clamped down properly. As it happened, I used the original standoffs as the nuts themselves. After that I used some rubber feet to elevate this case off whatever surface it would be on. Probably could have eyeballed this one, but well, here I am with a ruler. Back to the internal parts. I will need to fit the graphics card in, and to do this I'm going to use this 90-degree riser card that will allow the GPU to sit parallel with the main board. I'll also use this standoff to help prop it up. This will be resting on the CPU heatsink, but I'm sure that'll be fine. Next follows a series of experiments to try and get some kind of drive recognised on this thing. I tried using the cable out of the accessories box and had mixed results there too. Also, it was about seeing if all this junk would fit. To see if it could load from something, I tried to use the CF card from the testing. In the end, the one direction that actually allowed power up and fan spin showed that my CF card was not recognised. Really, I need to get a keyboard on this thing and set up the BIOS, as that could be part of the issue. But due to time, I would need to leave this too until the next part. Now there is one piece of hardware that I've neglected to mention thus far, and that is the thing that will go in here, the PC104 slot. There was only one way I could approach this, and that was the PCB way. Sorry, Chiropractic. I had planned to put one of the rasterized PC104 sound cards in there, but again, big surprise, this is something else that I've been having issues with. I ordered them, and they came, but originally I'd wanted to use the build service. But they came back wanting clarification on certain components on the BOM, and well, I had no idea what I was doing, so just ordered the boards bare. I had someone that would be able to help me with these, but two problems. I could not locate all the parts required. While I got most of them, the sound chip proved to be most difficult. To make matters worse, the timescales for producing this were now so tight that it'd be nigh impossible to get it done within the month, much less within the next week. So this is yet another casualty of this build. I have to say I'm rather disappointed. This card was important to the build as it would provide more than just sound. It would have dealt with the controller input. Oh well, at least we can try and fit it into the case to check it would fit, and oh look, it would. We're getting near the end of things to try. Surely we can have some good luck, right? Well, the front of this case is going to be home to the floppy drive, but you'll notice it's a bit wide. That's why I need to make something to adapt it to hold it. I knocked up this thing in 123D Design. I like this app, and while it's discontinued, it's nice and simple. I then once again got it printed by CraftCloud as they had been helpful before, and the pricing and turnaround are great. And here is a finished item. So to test it, it may be easy to take the front off the case. And I have done this before, so let's pop it off and have a go at fitting this. But this will work, right? Surely this will fit like a glove? Nope. By my reckoning, this thing is around 0.5mm too narrow. I think I'd forgotten to account for shrinkage. I decided to then attack the problem with a sanding block, but I sanded, and sanded, and sanded, and pretty much barely made a dent in it. At this point, I've practically run out of time, so there was nothing for it but to just put the case back together. And for the moment, this is the way it's gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was getting pretty stressed about this, and there's no reason why a project like this should make you feel like that. I'm bitterly disappointed that I couldn't actually get a lot of this stuff to work out. I just left myself too little time to actually get anything working. I've had hardware failures, my own procrastination and inability to stay awake, as well as Royal Mail strikes to contend with. What I think is best to do is just leave it for now. Come back to this with a clear head and more time to do it, and then we'll do some great things. You know, you can't win them all, and definitely, this is one of those cases. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed what you did see. If you did like it, subscribe, like the video, do all that good stuff. But for now, I'm out. See you later.